All righty, welcome to Monday. It is the Chico Borman Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. Good to have you along. We will be with you until 2 o'clock, and yeah, it's okay. It's going to be all right, kids. Obviously, the game ended Saturday. The sun came up yesterday. The sun came up today. You wouldn't know it because it's bitterly cold, but it will be okay. But this one still stinks. No victory Monday. No, not even close to a victory Monday. 45-14. The Texans just lay one on. Take the Browns behind the woodshed for an old-fashioned butt-whooping. And we're going to talk, obviously, about that here in a moment. Again, if you want to follow us, you can do so on Twitter at Chico Show CLE. Also on YouTube. Follow us there. If you are not, type in the Chico Borman Show, hit subscribe, and you'll be ready to go. Also available wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, does not matter. Coming up in an hour, we will hook up with Christopher Price, tracking him since last week after the news about Bill Belichick. He's covered the Patriots for 20 years. And has written a book about Belichick and knows him very well, and we'll get the latest on, well, the Patriots already named their coach, which I think was kind of very secretly done. Like, who knew that Gerard Mayo had a clause in his contract that said, you know, whenever he's done, Belichick, that Mayo's the guy. We're all sitting there going, is it going to be Vrabel? Is it going to be this guy, Ben Johnson? Is it? No, it's Gerard Mayo. So Christopher Price will weigh in on that coming up at 1 o'clock. Also going on interviews, coaching interviews. Jim Harbaugh reportedly is talking to the Los Angeles Chargers. Seems like that would be – he did play for the Chargers late in his career. I don't know what to think. I mean, I really don't know what to think about that, but we'll get into all of that later. Obviously, right now, it's all about the Browns, and I think the way it ended has a lot to do with kind of how we're feeling today. Like, if it ended, and it was a possibility on Friday, believe it or not, you know, it was a possibility on Friday that this thing was going to come to an end. I think the idea that they were absolutely embarrassed has a lot to do with folks like everybody's angry, or a lot of people are angry, and that's okay. I mean, you know, the team it was a poor performance pretty much all the way around. I mean, with the exception of a few guys, JOK played out of his mind. Nobody really came to play. The Browns secondary was irrelevant. Greg Newsome, like he was standing still. Nico Collins is still running. You know, Myles Garrett, 2 quarterback pressures? You know, Joe Flacco throws 2 pick sixes. It was not good. The energy coming out wasn't good. And, yeah, some people have said, well, you know, do you think that had anything to do with them resting players on Sunday against Cincinnati? I never thought in a million years, I'm not going to say it now, that I thought that was it. I think the bottom line is, I like you say, well, what the hell was Jim Schwartz doing? I think Jim Schwartz had the same game plan and pretty much, you know, was the same guy with the same philosophy as he is most weeks. But the players, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is about being on the road. I don't know. You know, a lot of times you say, well, it's just one of those crazy facts that you can't really explain. You know, you don't know why, but they just can't get it done. I mean, 30 points a game on the road. They gave up 45. I mean, you know, it's just, now granted, you know, you had a couple pick sixes. I get that. But, I mean, it was just ugly. I mean, it was ugly. Now, give credit where credit's due. Man, C.J. Stroud, that dude, when we talk about ice water in the veins, when we talk about, you know, under pressure, JOK, and again, the only guy that really showed up on Saturday, JOK had the pass to Nico Collins that got them down to the like inside the 5, whatever it was. I mean, he took an absolute shot from Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and just laid it right where it had to be. In the pocket, his feel in the pocket is unbelievable. I mean, there are guys that have been in the league 5, 7, 10 years that don't have the feel that he has in the pocket. He is special. He is going to be special for a while. This hurts even more because, you look at how the Texans compiled and added to this roster after the Deshaun Watson trade. And, they've C.J. Stroud, they've hit some home runs. It certainly has helped them get to where they are today. But here's the thing that I really want to get home to folks. The game itself sucked, but the job that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry did this year was phenomenal. And I don't care how angry you are. I don't care how, oh my gosh, somebody's got to pay for this. And how can you, nobody's okay with the loss on Saturday. I'm certainly not. But I think you have to take a big picture look. I think you can't just look at this and say, oh, well, the Browns, were taken behind the woodshed against Houston. Horrible season. I saw some people going, well, Flacco is who we thought he was. Shut up. I mean, everybody had Flacco fever. Then all of a sudden he throws 2 pick sixes and it's, well, he's back to being a pumpkin. Like, I mean, come on, man. I get it. Again, you're upset. And yes, Kevin Stefanski, as much as we don't like to, he has those cliches and he has those statements in the pressers, but they really did pick a bad day, the worst day, to have their worst day. Bottom line, all across the board with the exception of JOK. Greg Newsome got cooked. Greg Newsome was asked after the game how he played. He thought he played pretty good, he said. No, you didn't. And I like Greg Newsome, but for God's sake, dude, you were toasted in that game. Nico Collins was, there was a small ranch house between you and him half the time. Doesn't mean that he's not a great player, but no, you did not play a good game. Really, none of those guys played a good game. But I just don't feel this is the time or there ever will be a time where I'm not going to – this was a special season, okay? Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, let's go back to the beginning of the season. Terry Pluto wrote a great article about this today. Go back to the beginning of the season in Greenbrier. And Jimmy Haslam spoke to the media. Now, granted, the topic of conversation was primarily Deshaun Watson, but it became – Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, and there were talks about, hey, remember, and this seems like, years ago, but in Greenbrier, the questions were, hey, what do you think the record has to be? And, what would be the definition in your minds of a successful season? And remember, Jimmy and Dee were adamant. They are not going to put a number on what a successful season is. Do they want to make the playoffs? Do they think this is a playoff caliber team? Sure. But, we're just not going to do that. One of the things that they said even then was that Kevin Stefanski is 40 years old and Andrew Berry is 39. These guys are still pups when it comes to the game. Now, again, this was before the season played out. Now you fast forward to today and January 15th, and you say to yourself, this team, despite going through 4 or 5 quarterbacks, losing key guy after key guy after key guy, somehow, some way was able to manage 11 wins, get to the playoffs, and yeah, I know they got destroyed, but that is in and of itself incredible. Now, you can say all you want, well, that's what was expected at the beginning of the year. Well, the beginning of the year and the end of the year and how this whole thing played out, come on. Kevin Stefanski grew up this year. Kevin Stefanski became a better play caller as the season went along. Kevin Stefanski wasn't willing to take gambles that I think he was early in the season. Andrew Berry, he had a checklist. We talked about this a lot. He had a comprehensive checklist, Andrew Berry did, where, it was, okay, got to improve on the defense. We got to go and get guys up front on the defensive line. They did that. Some of those guys might be gone after this season, and they'll be looking at bringing in new guys there. I mean, there are going to be changes. There are going to be, but, this is Deshaun Watson's team, okay? Joe Flacco was it was a phenomenal job by him. The storyline was great. It ended. It was going to end at some point. We hoped it would end in Vegas. Unfortunately, it ended in Houston. My guess is he's probably not back with the team. If he is, and don't get any delusions of grandeur here, kids, because Deshaun Watson is the quarterback. I guess what I don't want to see happen, and I don't think it has for the most part, but what I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see people not give Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry the credit they deserve this year because they're mad about how this ended, or they don't like Jimmy Haslam, or they still don't like the Deshaun Watson situation. And, like I've said from the very beginning, the Deshaun Watson thing is a very polarizing topic. I understand that. And you are absolutely, positively entitled and should feel the way you want to feel. Nobody should be made to feel guilty if they do or don't root, or whatever you want to do. But folks, this season, what Stefanski and Berry did, and this is, okay, the pressure's on, and the Haslams have grown up, and Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have grown up. Now you say, well, the Haslams are up there. Yeah, but the Haslams, they needed experience just like everybody else does. I mean, we talk too much about players that get better with time, that are Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Look at the way that Koramoah was able to improve throughout this season. It was talked about during the broadcast that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK for short, much easier, JOK would make a mistake early in the year. He would let it fester. It would affect him on the next play, the next series, whatever. Then all of a sudden, Jim Schwartz got through to him, comes back on the field, and he's making plays, and he's got the short memory. Like, that is the evolution of players. The same thing happens for coaches. The same thing happens for general managers. Kevin Stefanski over the years has made many decisions where it's, you're scratching your head. You're downright frustrated. Why is he not running the ball more? Why does he get cute here? And I think it's okay to admit, like, hey, you know what? The guy's gotten better. He's supposed to get better. Andrew Berry is supposed to get better. And both of them did this year. Is there still work to be done? Hell yes, there's still work to be done. But, I caught somebody on social media, which is my fault, but somebody on social media was saying, well, I'm getting tired of the media. Now the media is too optimistic. Like, for a while, it's always that we're too pessimistic. Then we're too optimistic. Like, they went 11-5. They made the postseason against all odds, and they've got a lot to look forward to. That doesn't mean there won't be changes, but what about that should you, there are some things that you don't like. Obviously, the way it ended on Saturday. But if you're telling me that, like, you can't get past that in order to see, the forest for the trees, which in my mind is a great core, great young players, and a team that I think is now Deshaun Watson. Yeah, we say, well, we are still waiting for Deshaun Watson. He had the great game against the Baltimore Ravens. Unfortunately, that was his last game. And prior to that, it was kind of up and down. We don't know, but I believe Kevin Stefanski is going to put him in the best position to win now. I think Kevin Stefanski grew by leaps and bounds as a head coach and as a play caller. I mean, they did this without their starting quarterback, Nick Chubb, their starting tackles. I mean, I could go on and on. You guys know the story. Now, there are some things that really bother me from Saturday. I don't know what the hell that was from the secondary, okay? And, yeah, there should be questions asked. And, yeah, I'm a little disappointed when I know Greg Newsome is filled with confidence, okay? I know that, he's got more dance moves than, anybody on a reality TV show. And it's cool. It's great. Normally, the guy's played very well. He played like crap on Saturday. And he's not the only one, but he played like crap on Saturday. Okay? I think the Texans had a goal coming in. We want to try to match up Nico Collins on Newsome as much as we can to avoid Denzel Ward. They really didn't pick on Ward. Why would they? They had the matchup they wanted. The Browns never seemed to adjust. And that's where, as far as Jim Schwartz is concerned, I can't believe that Jim Schwartz didn't adjust. I think the players they laid an egg. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, Greg Newsome, no, you didn't play a decent game. You didn't even play an average game. You played a horrible game. Doesn't mean that we want to, throw you on the next plane out of Cleveland, but don't try to pull the wool over our eyes and be like, I thought I played pretty well. You played like crap. It happens. Yeah, that was frustrating. It was frustrating. And the level of the energy level, all of that, I don't know what to make of it. The idea of playing on the road, that's a bunch of BS. Well, until you come into that game giving up 30 points a game on the road, and then you allow them 45. And, yeah, I know about the pick sixes. So, I don't know. I mean, It sucks. There's no getting around. This feeling sucks because we wanted to ride this roller coaster as long as we possibly could. We wanted another turn on this ride. We're not going to get it this year. We're going to have to wait. It's going to be a long off season. But that does not erase the improvements and the strides that this team made and the resilience this team made or showed throughout the season. No way. No how. And I'm just not going to go there. Oh, well, you're rooting for it's not. If anything, I'm like I said over the years, we can't have it both ways. Either we're too pessimistic, we're too optimistic. They played a horrible game on Saturday. It's very disconcerting, but there is a reason to feel really good. You went 11-5 in the toughest division in football, mind you. Without question, the toughest division in football. And you had adversity like I've never seen before. So, all in all, there's a lot to be optimistic about other than the game itself. Bohm, your thoughts on Saturday. And you had to be, your boy CJ, you were grinning ear to ear even when I started the show today, Bohm.
Okay, look, Chico,
First of all, nobody believes whatever you're going to say about, I wanted the Browns, and nobody's going to believe it.
I was just as disgusted as you by what the Browns put out there on Saturday. It did not make me happy to see CJ Stroud dice up that Browns secondary. It hurt, okay? I can still be proud of him. But I'm very upset about how poorly things went down.
That is coming across really fake right now.
No, Chico, you know what? That 76-yard touchdown pass to Brevin Jordan that felt like a microcosm of just how ugly.
What was MJ Emerson doing there, by the way?
I have no freaking idea.
And I like another guy. He just gave up. He had a clear shot to put. All he has to do is push him out of bounds. It's almost like he was in a hallway and said, "Oops, excuse me, I'm in your way," and went right by him.
It's like one of those things where I can't even fathom what was going on, and I really wanted this Browns season to continue, Chico. This sucks. It to see something that felt so magical just completely crap the bed. I'm appalled. That being said, to criticize Joe Flacco and say he played an awful game when he really he made two major mistakes, right? That wound up being 2 pick sixes.
Oh, they were huge mistakes. Yeah, there's no getting around that.
But I really don't think that this is on him as a whole. I mean, that secondary, that defense, Myles Garrett seemed very practically invisible. It felt uncharacteristic from what we'd seen all season. Like, if ever there was a time for everything to go wrong, it happened on Saturday. And it's frustrating. It really, truly, sincerely felt like the Browns were going to make a run in this postseason. And to see it end like that, it just, I am proud of CJ. I am rooting for him here going forward in this postseason, but that was not what I wanted to see, Chico.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud in that game, 16 of 21, 274, 3 touchdowns. We forget, too, he did get pulled in that game, and he did sit for a length of time in the second half because, unfortunately, Flacco was throwing pick sixes. So, I mean, CJ's numbers, he could have lit them up for 400. I mean, the way he was going, the way Nico Collins, I guess one of the things that I look at, or we did look at going into the game and now being able to look back at it, the Browns knew going in Nico Collins was a big-time threat. And it seemed like they had no answer for him. Even though, he was targeted constantly. They were able to get the matchups they wanted, which largely was, let's try to get Nico Collins on Greg Newsome. And when they did, he got burnt. And he didn't just get, burnt. I mean, he got toasted. And then on the flip side of that, the Texans came out and said, okay, Amari Cooper, he's not going to have 260 like he did on Christmas Eve. Now, again, they were missing some key guys, Grenard and Will Anderson and a lot of guys. But, I mean, Amari Cooper was, and he was hobbled, but they did a great job. And then the other thing that we talked about, okay, in addition to the turnovers, eventually it's going to come back to bite you. It did. You know what else was going to come back to bite you? The offensive line. And Houston, I mean, my God, they were between Will Anderson and Harris. And, I mean, it was just all of these guys were in on the party. The offensive line was overwhelmed. I mean, when Leroy Watson got in there, no disrespect to him, but, they go right after him first play. The fact that it wasn't even close and the fact that none of these guys seem to have a sense of urgency. And I'm always one that says, it's kind of like when you hear, well, why isn't that manager in baseball? Shouldn't he be more upset? Well, again, just because we don't see him taking a baseball bat to a water cooler doesn't mean he's not upset. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think, oh, well, they didn't care. Of course they cared. But it's just, at what point do you want to go make a play? And the Texans came in and said, okay, we're going to use that aggression against them. Early on, that's okay. But Houston just kept saying, well, until they back off a little bit or until they show a proclivity to being able to answer what we're doing, we're just going to keep doing it. And that's what's frustrating. I mean, we're just going to continue. They were hell-bent on getting Nico Collins matched up on Greg Newsome, and most of the time they were successful. MJ Emerson, that Brevin Jordan thing, I don't know what that was. And again, okay, hey, good play call. It's set up well. CJ delivered. But, I had to look at that, and I have looked at that play. Honestly, of all the plays that happened on Saturday, I've looked at that play probably 8 to 10 times. Because I don't, Like, I need an explanation. I'm not saying, let me be clear. I'm not saying I want this. Oh, my God. He's a great player. I think he's the future for this team. But somebody has to explain to me how MJ Emerson, did he think, I don't know, did he think someone was behind him? Did he think somebody was going to make the tackle? Did he think that Jordan was going to step out of bounds? I don't know. But, dude, it's a playoff game, and you just, honestly, it was like, oh, excuse me, I just want to get by you here. That's what that was like. Like, hey, I'm going to go over to the sideline. I don't mean to get in your way here. Ooh, okay, all right. Like, what are you doing?
Now, Chico, okay. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, that that play just about sums up the Browns' performance from Saturday. But if ever there was a play to take away from that game, it was that linebacker putting a spin cycle on Joe Flacco's head after he hits him as he's sliding to the ground. I've never seen anything like that. You know what play I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, but you're saying, like, what as far as the game,
that was,
away.
I know it like ultimately wasn't a huge determining factor in the outcome of the game,
right?
But that was probably the most memorable moment that I will take away from that game, because that was just, I don't know if we're ever going to see anything like that. Just dude started breakdancing on Joe Flacco's head mid-game. That was wild. Okay, I digress.
You feel like it's like you're almost like you're like, hey, oh, hey, 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 oh, hey, hey, no, what?
Oh,
it's all right.
Gabagoo.
It's all right, Bone. We like the energy level. Yeah, like I said, I thought it was going to be different. But and the idea that this is going to take away, or some people, not many, but some want to, well, you know what? Hey, the Browns, there's no reason to be why would you be optimistic? Like, come on. Like I said, if you don't like the Deshaun Watson deal, you're entitled to that. But when the media, okay, I'm going to throw out three people in particular, because somebody on Twitter called out our boy Dan Labby, Mary Kay Cabot, and Ashley. How do you say your last name? Bastock? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I've enjoyed their work. And, this isn't, I have no reason to, oh my gosh, I got to stick up for them. But so somebody was just coming after them on social media. Like, what, do you ever criticize them? You think Mary Kay's never been criticized for criticizing them over the years? Dan Labby picked against them a couple weeks ago. Like, this guy was basically saying, "Oh, they never say anything negative." But here's the thing. Other than the game itself, which of course there was a ton of criticism, which they delivered, the other part of it is, okay, now moving forward, which I know is tough because we're only 48 hours removed. But when you look forward and you look ahead and you know that you've got some core pieces, Deshaun Watson has to stay on the field. Nick Chubb, we hope, is going to be back to Nick Chubb. That remains to be seen, but I think even 80%, 90% of Nick Chubb is still going to be great. But I think if anybody can get back to where he was, it's Nick Chubb. The offensive line, you get your tackles back. You get, there's going to be some new faces. There's going to be some new faces, I think, particularly because you basically went out and bought a new defensive line. So you're going to probably have to do the same thing. Some of those guys might come back. Some of them probably won't. But how can you not be optimistic? Like, this isn't a matter of, like, I have no allegiance to Jimmy Haslam or D. Haslam. I mean, truth be told, I don't necessarily like the way the whole thing went down with Deshaun Watson, but that's not going to get in my way of saying that the Browns, and there's a lot of reason to be hopeful, and that, moving forward, yeah, I'm going to root for the Browns, and I want the best for Deshaun Watson health-wise and for Browns fans, because they're the ones that hurt the most on this. But don't let certain people, like the guy I'm speaking of, that says, oh, well, they never criticize. It's okay to be optimistic. They went 11-5. They went 11-5, made the postseason, early exit, but they made the postseason when they could have just closed up shop after that Baltimore game, after they lose to L.A., after they lose to Denver. They didn't do that. Just the opposite. And then, Flacco, it'll never be. Somebody said because they lost this game and because Flacco threw 2 pick sixes, that his story, or when you look back on 10 years from now, nobody's going to remember. I totally disagree. I mean, no, okay, we're not going to be saying like, wow, remember that parade? And he was on the float because, well, there won't be a parade and there won't be a float. But you're telling me the only memory you have from this season is going to be Joe Flacco throwing 2 pick sixes? Come on. I mean, you're just trying to be negative. You're looking for something to be upset about. Be upset about the game. Be upset how it played out. Be upset that guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball, just had their heads up their rear ends, it seemed. But my God, like if you're going to say like, well, the sky's falling, Kevin Stefanski proved a lot to me this year, and I wasn't completely sold. I liked him a lot after 2020. Then it was, last year you had all the shenanigans, the finger pointing and blah, blah, blah. You bring in Jim Schwartz. That was the other thing that I think that bothered people is that Saturday's game, it was like a Scooby-Doo cartoon. where at the end of the cartoon, somebody's ripping off the mask that Jim Schwartz is wearing. They're like, you're not really Jim Schwartz. Who are you? Joe Woods? Like, that's what that felt like, because it was just constant miscommunication. It was constant this is what we did last year. And you can't, they had some games where they weren't great, certainly on the road, but like explosive plays, that was the big thing. Like, they weren't really giving those up much, but it's like it all just went to hell in a handbasket quick on Saturday. But I mean, that's what it felt like. That secondary performance and the defense in general, it felt like Joe Woods. And I'm not to, kick him or anything while he's down, but tell me I'm wrong. That's what a lot of people were saying, and I can't disagree with that. It felt like Joe Woods last year.
Chico, I got to shout out our pal Ronald because it sounds like you two are on the same page.
Uh-oh.
He chimed in on our YouTube comments, and he said it looked like a Joe Woods defense. So, yeah, you two, same wavelength right there, Chico.
Thank you, Bo.
You're welcome.
Yeah. But, again, having said all of that, I think there's still a lot to look forward to, and a lot to take away from the season and be happy about. Wow, we got 2 more games today. We got the Buffalo Bills hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. That I was watching. I saw some of those photos that were coming on Saturday. Like I'm usually a fan of look, play the game. It's football, but dude, there's no way. I mean, at some point, it's got to resemble, or you want it to resemble, the game of football. If guys can't see, I always joke about that, that Snow Bowl, Ohio State, Michigan, in 50, right? I mean, I don't want 62 punts in a game. And okay, yeah, there's going to be poor conditions. The conditions today are not going to be great, but at least there's snow that's cleared. It's going to be freezing cold, but it's not going to be blowing blizzard where you can't see anything. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So you got the Bills and the Steelers from Buffalo. You got the Buccaneers and the Eagles from Tampa. Baker's going to give it a go, a bit banged up. And then, yeah, we still got to get to some of the games. Well, the game last night, man, Detroit and L.A., that was fantastic. Good for Jared Goff. I was wrong. I think the only game I got right was I think I ended up going with Kansas City. I thought I went with them at the very end because I said Miami's too banged up.
We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Chico.
No, I mean, I'm not. I shouldn't get the benefit of the doubt because I mean, I had it circled on my sheet, is why I said, and that was from Friday. The rest of them I missed. If I went, 0 for 4, then I went 0 for 4.
How about them Cowboys, Chico?
Yeah, well,
Boy,
that's.
I mean, if there was, okay, so the Browns' performance was embarrassing, and the Cowboys, they sort of managed to make it interesting at the end, but that had to be the most embarrassing performance of the Super Wildcard weekend.
Well, yeah, it had to be. And the thing that's ironic here is like, okay, Dan Quinn and Jim Schwartz. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll take a break. We'll get into this when we come back. We will talk about the Dallas performance. We'll talk about the Browns performance. Possibly Mike McCarthy. Good for you. 3 straight 12-win seasons, but you might be packing your bags, believe it or not. Unbelievable. We'll recap all of that, and then top of the hour, New England has gone their direction. We wondered, would it be Mike Vrabel? Would it be somebody else? It was Gerard Mayo all along. We just didn't know it. Now for Bill Belichick, where might he end up? Jim Harbaugh is interviewing with the Chargers. I think Belichick just waits this out. Why wouldn't he? He wants a team that, like, let's say it is Dallas. He wants a team that he doesn't want to start up. He doesn't want where he has to build something. He wants Don Shula's record, and then I think I'm not saying right after he's retiring, but he wants a ready-made team as best he can get. He wants like what Tom Brady had when Tom Brady left or left New England and then ended up signing with Tampa Bay. He wants a team that's close. So does Belichick. We'll talk to Christopher Price from the Boston Globe coming up about that at the top of the hour. But recapping yesterday and one pretty interesting development involving both Jim Schwartz and Dan Quinn. We'll talk about that when we come back. Chico Borman Show. More to come on this Monday right here on the Big Play Sports Network. Welcome back, Chico Borman Show, as we roll through it on this Monday. Good to have you along. Bitterly cold out there. Wait, how about that shot of Andy? I mean, admit it. Even if you were in a bad mood, and we were all in a bad mood, seeing all of that, the social media of like Andy Reid's transformation into a walrus was freaking hilarious. Like, that was, I mean, there's cold and then there's that in Kansas City. And the other thing, here's what I don't understand. Like, real quick on, like, Travis Kelce is a great player, obviously, right? And I'm not talking about, Tay-Tay and all that stuff. Great player. Why would you go without shirt sleeves in a game like that? Because it seemed like wouldn't you get to a point where you can't feel your arms? And if you can't feel your arms, then you're not going to be able to lift your arms as easily as you would if you can. And like, I'm all for being macho, okay? And it wasn't just Kelce, but Kelce's a little bit different because he's a wide receiver, tight end, whatever, pass catcher. I mean, in that type of cold, I don't care how tough you are. And I've said this before, like baseball players in like April when it's, freezing rain outside. Like, I don't care how mentally tough you are. You don't want to be standing in right field when that's going on. I don't care how mentally tough you are. You are freezing your ass off at Arrowhead. And like Kelce's arms looked like they were purple. That was, wow. I don't know. But the Kansas City Chiefs do advance. The game that I think everybody's talking about, well, the two, obviously, from yesterday. Lions 24, Rams 23. Absolutely incredible performance by Jared Goff. I got to give Jared Goff a lot of credit. He was a guy that I thought was going to melt down. Or at the very least, I didn't think he would play the way he did. 22 of 27, 277 touchdown. He looked firmly in control. Lions, first playoff win in 32 years. Second since 1957. You feel good for Detroit fans. I liked the Rams in that game. Like I said, I thought I went with what I thought the more experienced coach and Sean McVay, and I went with the more experienced quarterback in Matthew Stafford. But give Jared Goff a lot of credit, and I think the Lions could be something special here. But really, the game I think everybody's talking about right now is the Dallas Cowboys falling to the Packers 48-32. How about them Cowboys? How about them? How about the Cowboys? 48-30. It was 27-0 before you even really blinked an eye. How about the Packers? You talk about a great move, like an all-time alpha move. They win the toss. You're on the road in Dallas. You know what? We'll defer to the second half. No, we want the ball. Wait a minute. You want the ball with this young quarterback against this vaunted Dallas defense led by Dan Quinn and Micah Parsons and whoa. Jordan Love Jordan Love, all these quarterbacks making their first playoff game. Jared Goff wasn't his first, but these quarterbacks with not much experience just came out and really lit it up. But I mean, Jordan Love looked outstanding. Did not seem fazed one bit. Meanwhile, Dallas was an absolute train wreck to the point where now 3 12-win seasons. All right, do we think, Bohm, I'll put you on the spot. Do we think that Jerry Jones will indeed pull the plug on the Mike McCarthy experiment despite 3 12-win seasons?
Chico, those were some of the shakiest 12-win seasons I've ever seen put forth from a professional football team. And look, you hear from EK and he talks about how the Cowboys, like, they continue to let you down. And I think this season, this felt almost in hindsight inevitable because they never truly beat down. Like,
you didn't really think. I mean, you didn't pick. I didn't hear anybody that liked the Packers. If anybody thought a game was going to be a blowout, let me just say this: if anybody thought a game was going to be a blowout, they thought it was going to be that game, but they thought it was going to be Dallas over Green Bay, and it was the opposite.
I do distinctly remember telling you I wanted to pick the Packers so badly, or Jordan Love in this game, so badly.
Because you had but you were all about the sentimental and
Chico, he's been looking great this season.
Yes, he has, but saying you wanted them to win versus I picked them to win are two totally.
It's not even a rooting interest. Like, I'm not a Packers fan to any extent.
Well, then
whatsoever.
why didn't you pick them? I'm going to hold your feet to the fire because you love this. Oh, I always wanted to.
Honestly, Chico, I think in the moment, the way that you made it out, I couldn't not pick the Cowboys.
Oh, I would. Yeah. Hey, look, I was dead wrong. I mean, I was horrible this weekend. I have no problem saying that. I thought the Browns would win. I think I said 30-24. It ended up 45-14. And by the way, all of a sudden, Jim Schwartz and Dan Quinn, who were two very hot candidates, and I don't think. Here's the thing: I never know how to gauge this sort of thing, because do we really think that all of a sudden Dan Quinn and Jim Schwartz, like all of the requests go right out the window? Like, oh my God, the Browns lost how? The Cowboys lost. What was that final? Well, you know what? We don't want to interview Dan Quinn. I can't imagine that's happening. But I will say those two guys, there's no getting around it. Those two guys, Dan Quinn and Jim Schwartz, who were very hot candidates, two of the best defensive coordinators, certainly Schwartz is, and might this be in a roundabout way, and I'm sorry for Jim, but might this be the best thing for the Browns because maybe he does return? And plus you have some coaches that are going to be, waiting it out, getting other jobs. I don't know. I just Jim Schwartz. I can't believe that a team would just say, well, because of the way the Browns season ended, we don't want Jim Schwartz. Just doesn't make sense. And Jim Schwartz over Dan Quinn, too. But both of those guys now, I mean, they didn't exactly help their cases, put it that way. But, man, the Cowboys, this is going to be, does Belichick, remember I said Belichick, and we'll talk to Christopher Price from the Boston Globe at the top of the hour. Belichick is going to wait this out. Belichick doesn't want to go to, just any old team. He wants a shot to win. Dallas is ready-made to win. They just need to get their butts in gear at the most opportune times. Is Bill Belichick that guy? Now, what's, of course, interesting about this is Belichick comes in. If he wasn't going to concede power in New England, and I'm guessing he probably wasn't, would he really be? I mean, we're talking about the most hands-on owner pretty much in sports, in Jerry Jones. I mean, I want it just for the soap. I want it just for the drama. I can't believe Belichick in Dallas. Atlanta, I can see. Dallas, just no way. I can't see that.
Feels like an inevitable clashing of heads.
Do we think that Mike McCarthy's absolutely gone? Like, here, if you're Jerry Jones, it's never, and this is why you want this quality in owners. You don't want to be knee-jerk. You don't want to be reactionary. Matter of fact, I think it's one reason why I give Jimmy and D credit. Much like we talked about coaches and players getting better, I think ownership has gotten better from the standpoint of we're not just going to, because it seems like the thing to do, the way the season ended last year, we're sticking with these guys. We like these guys, and it paid off for them. But if you're Jerry Jones, how old is Jerry? 81? I don't know how many more. They haven't been to an NFC title game since 95. Now, what's interesting is you don't have to worry about losing in the NFL divisional round if you don't get to the divisional round. That was also a good meme, like one of these. Don't have to lose in the divisional round if you don't get to the divisional round. Yeah. I mean, Jerry's time is it's ticking. It's always ticking in Dallas. I get that. But we're talking about a guy that's never had no one's ever had 3 consecutive 12-win seasons for the Cowboys. And we're talking about, Jimmy Johnson. We're talking about Barry Switzer. We're talking about Tom Landry. I know the schedule's longer. It certainly, is conducive to somebody getting that done. But still, could Mike McCarthy be off to that barn in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, or wherever the hell he's at? He might be. He might be holed up in that barn again because he might very well lose his job. What a weekend. I mean, what a weekend. It's still not over, by the way. I mean, people are talking about if the Eagles lose to the Buccaneers, might Nick Sirianni be in trouble? The way that thing, I don't think so. I don't think so. But if they lose to the Buccaneers, and I think it's a distinct possibility, is Nick Sirianni's job in jeopardy as well? Nobody saw Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys losing to the Packers. I'm sorry. And at the very least, even if you did, you didn't see him losing like that. It was, what was it? It was like 40-something to 16 midway through the third. It was 27-0 before anybody even got their drinks and refreshments and all that stuff. What the hell was that? And you're at home. You're in Big D, for God's sake. Jordan Love was just playing pitch and catch. Jordan Love was he was laughing at your defense. Remember what was that deal with Micah Parsons where they show blitz and then they drop him in coverage? What move was that? Micah Parsons, you're not dropping that dude in coverage in that situation. You send his ass. 2 young quarterbacks. I know C.J. Stroud, the youngest at 22, and Jordan Love's been there a few years. But 2 quarterbacks really, really, I think, surprised and amazed. I mean, you saw this from C.J. throughout the year, but in the postseason, to just have the nerves of steel and the ice water in the veins the way Jordan Love and C.J. Stroud did, wow. I mean, that was really, really impressive. Really impressive. Now we wait. What happens with Mike Tomlin? They say that Mike Tomlin is going to, because this is the first time. This is interesting. The Steelers never let their head coach's contract run out, basically, right? Like if he's their guy, they're gonna get it done. They waited. They're not sure, which means Mike Tomlin also isn't sure. Now, I know they have a game to play at 4:30 in Buffalo, and the way this weekend's going, I don't care. I predicted Buffalo. Who knows what's going to happen? Boom, did you pick the Steelers?
I did pick the Steelers. I mean, Chico,
to win, not to cover, to win.
To win. It has been a wild card weekend, Chico.
Thank you.
I think at this point all bets are off. Like, how could you pick a I'm glad that I'm not a professional picker for this weekend because it's just a lot of things have I felt like gone off the rails.
Well, not to get away from my point, if let's say the Steelers lose today, which they could and probably will, but who knows? Is Mike Tomlin? I mean, Mike Tomlin might be out. Mike Tomlin, and I don't mean Mike Tomlin gets fired. I mean Mike Tomlin. Keep in mind, he didn't get that contract extended like the Steelers normally do. Tomlin might very well say, you know what, man, I'm looking around and all these TV places want me and they think I'm going to be great on the air. And, if everybody really doesn't want me here, then okay, fine. It could happen. It could happen. Crazy, crazy, crazy season. All right. Without further ado, he's back in the. I love it. He's back in the man cave, Bohm, and that means over his left shoulder, our right, is Wu Tang forever. He is Christopher Price of the Boston Globe joining us. A lot of news involving the Patriots. Christopher, it is great to have you. Happy New Year to you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Well, we're kind of licking our wounds here. We thought I don't want to say anybody got cocky because they didn't, but you just felt like, the team of destiny thing was kind of played a little bit. I don't think anybody realistically thought this team was going to the Super Bowl, but you felt good that they were going to, knock off Houston, at least get to that divisional round. And not only did they not get there, but they got their butts handed to them. So we're kind of licking our wounds right now. What is the attitude in New England right now? Obviously, it wasn't like a just miss. They knew this was coming. And I got to tell you, let me just say, with Gerard Mayo, did anyone know that was a clause in his contract? Because it seemed like when Vrabel became available, what's the decision? It was like the decision was already made, right?
Yeah. The succession plan was already in place. This was something that had been kind of brewing over the last year or so. And I think that he was empowered in a way last year that I've never seen a New England assistant empowered in that manner before, maybe other than Dante Scarnecchia. They issued a press release saying that he was staying with the team, that he's going to have an expanded role, that he sat in on interviews for offensive coordinators. They'd never done that for an assistant before. So I think in the end, we probably all should have seen this coming. But look, the Vrabel stuff was interesting for about 24 hours. In the end, though, it's Gerard's show. It's a very strange situation up here in New England. The finality of what we saw on Thursday, I think, was still it still kind of took you back a little bit because 20 plus years, steady as she goes franchise, same coach, same owner. They're entering a brave new world now, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle it.
We don't know where Bill's going to end up, and I think he's going to wait this out because I don't think he's looking for taking a rags to riches story. We know he wants that record. Maybe if Dallas is available, the way this weekend played out, who knows? But the one thing that has been talked about a lot, and it's being brought up again a lot, is, was it more Belichick? Was it more Brady? I think it's okay to just say, look, it was both of them because, some people say, well, Belichick's going to bring that culture to name the team. I don't know if you're ever going to get that culture again. I'm not saying that he's not going to bring, the Bill Belichick style and the discipline, but Christopher, you know this better than anybody, and we've talked about this. One of the things that made them so great, the two of them, was that Tom Brady was willing to, hey, if you want to treat me like I'm the 53rd guy on the roster and I'm going to act that way, I'm going to practice that way, my mentality. I don't know if people just think you're going to snap your fingers and get that dynamic again. I don't think it's happening.
No, I agree with you. I think that in this day and age, in the salary cap era, with plan parity, with everything designed to bring everyone back to the middle, that you're just not going to get it again. You're going to see teams like Kansas City have a great run, but you're not going to see 6 Super Bowls in, 19 years, 18 years. And I think part of that was due to the relationship between the coach and the quarterback. Look, we all mentioned the Spurs as the best analogy, where you have the coach, the GM, the owner, and the superstar all kind of pulling on the same oar. They had that here in New England for a very, very long time. Belichick isn't Belichick without Brady, and Brady isn't Brady without Belichick. So, look, you want to go back a ways. I'll liken it to the Otto Graham Paul Brown relationship, the Vince Lombardi Bart Starr, that individually they would have success, but together it was it was unfair for the rest of the league at times.
Yeah, and I think we also we always want that feel good story. All good things really do come to an end. And Belichick and Brady, towards the end, I think, what I just talked about, what made it so special with Brady, I think maybe after a while, human nature, you know what, I'm kind of enough I've had enough of being that guy that he can say Brady, Foxborough High quarterback could have made that. It's time to move on. So I think that's the case. Tell me why Gerard Mayo. Do people like the hire? I mean, I'm sure they love Gerard. Do they like the hire for the New England Patriots?
They like the hire. Let's kind of separate this a little bit, though. They
Okay.
like the hire. I think there's a high level of respect for Gerard Mayo amongst the New England Patriots fan base. I think people aren't crazy about the fact that they haven't hired a GM, and there's reports that they're not going to hire a GM, that they're going to keep the same front office crew basically in place. Because for a lot of people, this feels like Jonathan Kraft is the new GM or Robert Kraft is the new GM. And a lot of people are a little bit unsettled there. They would love to be able to have a face, a name, a single individual to kind of focus on as the next leader of this franchise off the field anyway. Whether that is going to, even if it's going to be a quote unquote retread, if it's going to be John Robinson coming back from Tennessee, whatever the case, maybe Dave Ziegler coming back from Las Vegas, they're unsettled with the idea of not having a GM in place. And I think when you go into such a key offseason, when you're facing, you have the third pick in the draft, the highest pick for this franchise in 30 years, when you have gobs of cap space, when you have a lot of questions, at least on the offensive side of the ball, I think people want to be able to know that there's 2, 3, 4 people in the room making the decisions. If it's not Bill, if it's not like the head coach / GM, they want to have a level of security, a good feeling about whoever else is in there. And I think that's still kind of up in the air, at least at this point.
The thing that I wonder about just myself is if Gerard Mayo's the guy. Obviously, I'm sure he's extremely appreciative to the Kraft family. Like, hey, he could have, Vrabel was, but they have the trust in me that I'm going to be the successor to, one of the greatest, if not the greatest to ever do it. That said, you're in the war room, and we've seen this with Dallas. Like, hey, Robert wants to go here. Jonathan wants to go here. Is Gerard Mayo going to have the voice to say, hey, guys, I appreciate all you did, but I think that is absolutely the wrong call?
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. And that's one of the things that Robert talked about last Thursday after they made the move that they did, that there was, they didn't want any confusion with the idea that, because it was talk up here that Bill would remain the head coach, but they would bring in a new GM. And Robert very much kind of dismissed that and said, look, it would be hard to give him the power, then take the power back. So look, that's all up in the air at this point. And again, going into such a key offseason with a third overall pick, there's a sense of we're not 100% sure who is going to be the guy making the final decision. And part of that is just like I said before, the idea of the brave new world that we're in, that there's going to be some confusion there. If they go out and pick a guy who maybe doesn't necessarily work out, is it on Jonathan? Is it on Robert? Is it on Gerard? Who is going to be the person? Is it going to be on Matt Grove, who's in charge of personnel now? Is it going to be on Elliot Wolf, who's taking a more central role in personnel? So there's some questions about the off-field aspect of team building that I think kind of concerns some people up here at this point.
Christopher Price has been covering, he has covered the Patriots for 19 seasons, so another one in the books for Christopher. You can follow him on Twitter at CPriceGlobe. Before we move on to Belichick here quickly, what is the stat? Because the big thing right now is this quarterback position and Mac Jones and who is it? Do you see them? Do you think it's pretty much a done deal that they're going to go quarterback in this draft and they need to find their guy, or are they going to hold out hope that Mac Jones can be that guy?
They're either going to go quarterback in the draft or free agency or trade. This team is not going to open the 2024 season with Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi as their number one quarterback. They can't do that at this point and hope to have any level of success. I like both of them. I think Mac's a decent enough guy. I think Bailey's a decent enough guy. They're not number one quarterbacks as we know it in the NFL. I think that there's a couple of different options, obviously, and I'm of the belief that you should push all your chips to the middle of the table on Caleb Williams if you have the opportunity. If you can convince the Bears to trade down, then you go get Caleb Williams now. Or the other option is that you take Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you hope that someone like Michael Penix is available at the top of the second round, and you can bring in a guy who is a veteran free agent bridge guy someone who can be a holdover, a stopgap, just in case Michael Penix isn't ready to go, someone like a Jacoby Brissett, and then you kind of move on from there. So I guess ultimately answer your question, yeah, I think that they have to address the quarterback position in this offseason, regardless of whether it's the draft, free agency, trade, whatever the case may be.
So, Christopher, you have covered Coach Belichick for a long, long time. I think you've gotten to know him a little bit personally as well. Is the fire? I know I asked you this about a few months ago. Is the fire still burning as brightly inside of Belichick to continue head coach in the NFL?
Yeah, I believe that to be the case. It was interesting, Chico, that one of the things that I noticed in the little breakup session that we had last Thursday was that Bill didn't mention anything about his future, about what he wanted to do. But Robert said, I'm going to root for Bill as long as he's not facing us. And so that leads me to believe that they had a conversation where Bill said, look, I'm going to end up coaching somewhere down the road. Yeah, he still loves coaching. He still loves teaching. He's the guy who even, this summer you could spot him in the corner of the practice field during training camp, working with a backup long snapper, working with, wide receivers, quarterbacks. He loves the game. It's in his DNA. And part of that goes back to his dad, but it's just in him. He loves football. He loves coaching football. He loves teaching football. Might end up taking a year off if the job that he ultimately wants isn't open now. But yeah, he's definitely going to be coaching again.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think we are all just, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. First of all, I think, and you can speak to this, I mentioned it earlier, Bill Belichick, my guess, is going to wait. He wants the right job. Now, again, we don't know what Jerry Jones in Dallas is going to do and all that stuff. But I don't think Belichick is necessarily in any hurry to just jump in because, I need to get a job. He could sit out. He could sit out and wait it out, and then maybe next year, returns to the sideline.
Yeah, he loves NFL films, and he's so intertwined with the history of the game, obviously. But he loves NFL films, and so he could end up doing something for NFL Network for a year. And until the right job comes along, there's some similarities there. It's not parallel tracks, but there's some similarities there to Phil Jackson, where he could sit and wait for his job. He could be the final piece of the puzzle for a team that is just kind of right there. And that's where the Dallas conversation, I think, for a lot of people is so intriguing. But I think literally over the next couple of years, you know how fast things turn over in the NFL. He could find a job that he loved and he could be there for the next 5 years. So he really is going to have his options. This is not the kind of guy who, I did a radio hit with some folks in Atlanta, and they were all hot over the idea of Bill Belichick coming to the Falcons. I'd love the Falcons. They're a great organization. But look, if Dallas is available, if, let's say, a couple of years down the road, Green Bay is available, if another job opens up, he's going to go there. And I think ultimately he's going to have plenty of options down the road, whether it's TV this year, whether it's jumping right back in, whether it's taking a break, whatever the case may be, he's going to have a gig sooner rather than later.
Do you think that some teams would view him? Obviously, you said in Atlanta the temperature was they wanted him. Do you think some teams will look at him as a gamble, and not because we know the resume's there, but how much longer is he going to do it? Does he get Shula's record? Because to some degree, I want to bring somebody in if I'm a franchise and be able to build something and think about the future. But how far into the future can you think about with Belichick?
I think that's a terrific question, and I think the real issues might arise when you have a discussion about personnel control versus X's and O's. If Bill walks in there and says, "Look, I want to have personnel control," you could, if you're an owner, you could say, "Well, Bill, the last 5 years, your drafts weren't all that great, and when you started with the Patriots in 2000." There were a dozen teams, probably a dozen head coaches who had complete control over personnel. Now, there's half that. So look, the game has changed. If you want to come in here and be our coach, we're okay with that. But if you want to come in and handle personnel, if you want to be the GM, I don't know. So I think that's where the questions would arise. If I'm an owner and I say, "Look, I love what you're doing, Bill, on the field. I still think you got it. You're able to take chicken, what, and turn it into chicken salad." From a personnel perspective, from an on-field perspective, we love that. But the questions arise when Bill is going to start asking about personnel control. If he starts asking about personnel control, look at the season-ending press conference with us we had the day after the Jets game, and maybe part of this was just him feeling under the weather. He seemed open to the idea of working with the GM. So who knows? But I think that's where you're going to have the biggest sticking points when Bill walks into a quote-unquote job interview with an owner. That's where you're going to see a really interesting conversation take place.
A few more minutes with Christopher Price of the Boston Globe joining us here on the Chico Borman Show on the Big Play Sports Network. So I'm putting you on the spot here, and I know this spans so many years, but is there one moment, one exchange, maybe it was like a personal moment that you had with Bill that still sticks to you this day? I mean, where you say, man, that was unbelievable.
I was lucky enough to be able to run the Boston Marathon a couple of years ago. And Bill, I don't know if a lot of people know this about him. Bill is a runner. Bill has run half marathons. He's run marathons. And I had the opportunity to talk to him just in a one-on-one situation about the mental toughness, the physical toughness, any words of advice. And we had a really fun conversation. He talked about running this marathon once where he was approaching the finish line and there was a big cheer. And he, in his back of his mind, is like, okay, well, they're cheering me. This is great. This is fantastic. Everyone knows me. I'm Bill Belichick. Turns out there's like an 85-year-old man behind hhim, right on his heels, and everyone's cheering for him. But just stuff like that, an ability to connect with him. I have him somewhere. I should pull him out and show you. He used to send me, he would send Christmas cards every year to some members, I guess some members of the league.
Members.
Yeah, but I would get a Christmas card every single year, and I would make sure in a moment either before or after press conference say thank you very much for the card, Bill. It was really nice. But just little things like that, little individual things like that. I got the needle a couple times in press conferences where I would ask a stupid question and he would kind of, he would get after me a little bit. But look, I'll say this. I learned more about football from covering him for 19 seasons. I became a better reporter because I covered him. And he made you be better. He made you be better. And one of the things when people ask me about Vrabel, when Vrabel was here in New England, the possibility that the Patriots are going to hire him as a head coach, like, you got to be on your what, because he's not afraid to volley that question back into your court and make you look foolish. Bill wouldn't be as blunt sometimes as Vrabel, but you became better. You became a better football reporter. You became a better football fan from having just talked to him over the years. So those are the things, those personal things that I'm really going to take away from my time with him. It was quite a ride. It was extraordinary.
Be interesting to see not only where he ends up, how the Patriots move on from here. Gerard Mayo is their new head coach, and again, what happens coming up in the draft. Not used to saying that with the Patriots after all those years of dominance. Christopher, great stuff as always, man. I know you've been swamped with this, as we can imagine, over the last week, but I appreciate you taking some time, and Happy New Year to you, bro.
My pleasure, bud. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Christopher Price, again, Boston Globe. Follow him on Twitter at CPriceGlobe. I don't think we really have entertained the idea that, look, Bill might very well just, okay, I can wait it out another. He doesn't have to if the job's not right. Dallas, boy, and I mean, before this weekend, we didn't think it. This is why with football, this is why with sports, but certainly football this season, like, you got to wait. You got to just hang tight, because what you think you don't know, and in about 3 hours, we're going to prove it. And so, I mean, we're looking at this situation, and we're basically saying if Mike McCarthy indeed moves on, I mean, I would think Bill Belichick is absolutely in that mix. But again, the idea of Belichick and Jerry Jones not agreeing on, I don't know. It just seems so crazy, but it could happen. It could happen.
Honestly, Chico, that's a relationship that I can't totally wrap my head around. It's tough to fathom the thought of Bill Belichick working under Jera in Jera world. I really obviously the personnel, you feel like it's there, and it's something that Bill would be eager to get his hands on. But that dynamic between him and Jerry Jones, I don't see that as feasible.
I wonder with Belichick. That was interesting what Christopher said, too, about Atlanta, because I think Atlanta would make a lot of sense for him. I mean, look, they don't have the talent and the roster that Dallas has. But I don't think Atlanta is just like that far. I mean, you got to find a quarterback. Pretty important piece, by the way. But I don't think Atlanta is that depleted that it's going to take forever. I don't think this is one of those, and I do think that's important to Belichick. As much as he still loves coaching, and I 100% believe that and agree with Christopher Price that yes, he does. But I don't think he wants to spend a year, 2 years, certainly 3 years plus trying to, okay, can we get a quarterback? Can we find this guy? What else do we? But I also think that it's I could see that happening. I could see Atlanta happening. You're smirking. What's up?
Honestly, to me, Atlanta has one of the, I don't want to say one of the better rosters in the NFL, but I do think they have a very good roster. They just need someone at that quarterback position to make all the difference.
Yeah.
And I could definitely see some appeal from Bill's perspective. I guess it just feels weird to imagine Bill Belichick coaching the Falcons. But then again, it probably feels weird hearing him associated with any other team.
I mean, I can't even picture him in Big D.
Yeah.
I can't even picture him in Jerry World Dome or Jerry's. I can't. But, again, and I think this really all goes back to, and I don't want to put it all on the Don Shula record, because I think sometimes when we do that, we take away from the idea that, hey, this guy does still love coaching, loves teaching. So, yes, the record, and I actually think it's great that he's candid about it. He has no problem saying, yeah, you know what? He's the greatest to ever do it. And certainly from a numerical standpoint, a numbers standpoint, yeah, he's got the record. I want that record. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think what it does is it takes away from, he still has a burning desire to coach and coach guys up and make teams better. But again, it is a gamble for any team. It is a gamble for a club. How long does he really want to be here? If he gets disinterested or something happens he doesn't like, does he just bolt? I mean, who knows? Who knows how that's going to play out? So we'll just have to wait and see. But all right, we're going to take a break. We come back. We're going to play a little fair or foul. We're going to get back into the Browns. Yeah, it was bad, but folks, there's still a lot to be happy about, proud about, and excited about when you're talking about next season. That is on the way. Chico Borman Show, more to come right here on the Big Play Sports Network. righty, welcome back. It is time on this Monday edition, and yeah, we're a little somber, but and it is freezing outside. But folks, the Browns had themselves one hell of a season when we thought it was over. I think you can probably go as early as Nick Chubb going down, and 4 or 5 points during the season where people just said, "Okay, it's been they tried." They gave it their best effort. It just ain't going to happen. And yet, they did make it to the playoffs. Now, Saturday was a disaster, unmitigated disaster. A lot of people have to answer some questions, but it was a fun ride. Now, we had I don't know about it. I think when EK comes on, when Casillas comes on, he always has really good analogies, right? And we had D. Soul, I think last week said something about Michigan bowling with the gutters up, but it never hits the gutter, and that was their scene. I'm like, I'm not following that one. Here's another one. Let me hear this one.
Yeah, Chico. I too am a fan of a good old analogy, and I do want to shout out our pal Square Table Degenerates for the effort. He did compare this Brown season. Okay, so he said, quote, "Imagine a really fun roller coaster ride, best you've had in years, but it ends in a crash and many of your friends are hurt and can never ride a roller coaster again." That was this year.
I don't understand the end of it.
It was a little extreme. I feel like, having all your friends get hurt on the ride and like never being able to ride the roller coaster.
Why wouldn't they be
again.
able to ride again?
Okay, so I could see it as like, this hurts so bad that I never want to follow the Browns
Oh,
again.
jeez.
That's
Well, if that's
my
the case,
interpretation.
I know that's your okay. That's your. If it is, then the guy was never really a fan to begin with. I mean, if we're gonna go that route, then
Sports are traumatizing, Chico.
no, boom. Seriously, a game like that, you're telling me an 11-5 season, and then Saturday comes, and then they weren't really a fan. I mean, if you are not, and that's not, we don't know if that's the case, but if that's your take, see, I wonder if you would do that. I think you probably would. You would, yeah. I mean, we already know you were rooting for the Texans on Saturday anyway.
Well, that's not totally true.
Yeah, it's close.
My stance on sports have changed a lot since crying to Ohio State losing the national championship against Florida 41-14. I try not to let it traumatize me. Obviously, it hurts, and it freaking sucks.
Okay, so you lost in the wild card round, and you're never going to root for the Browns again?
Yeah, I can't not root for them. I just like...
That makes no
I
sense.
try not to let the losses hurt me to that extent, because at the end of the day, it's just sports. It's just an escape for a few hours.
Okay, but I guess, again, back to what I was saying, and I've said this before in the past with, like, baseball, because there were Indians fans, Guardians fans, whatever, when Francisco Lindor, before he left, I mean, you always get this with guys. If they trade away Frankie, I am never, ever watching another Indians or Guardians game. I'm never going. Okay, first of all, you know that's not true. You also know it's asinine. And if that's really true, then you really weren't a fan. So I guess that's where I'm at with that. And again, that might not be what that dude was saying, but if that's, your friends would never be able to ride it again. Like, did he have friends pass away Saturday night? I'm not trying to be cold, but like, did they, like, that was their last game that they could watch?
That was a very intensely dark analogy out of Square Table Degenerates.
And I'm sure more to come with you on Fair to Foul.
Well, before I get into my topics, Ronald jokingly suggests fair or foul. Bohm loves CJ more than the Browns.
Fair.
I know you would say that, Chico.
Yes, I think many would say.
I'm really sad that I can't watch Browns football next weekend, okay? It does hurt. I do want to see. I wanted to see this ride keep going.
With that huge smile on your face, I can tell how much it's okay.
I freaking love CJ Stroud, okay? But I love the Browns too. They're my first love.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Whatever. I digress. Let's
Just
move on.
yeah.
I want to actually dive into the Browns though, and in a number of facets, really.
Yeah.
So the first one I want to ask you, it's something that I've seen come under fire. In hindsight, I think it's more of an issue than it was in the moment, because it's really hard to knock the Browns for resting their players in that final game of the season. But it's come out, like, statistically, just how poor some teams perform in the playoffs after having rested their starters in the final game of the season. So with that, Chico, fair or foul, the Browns' decision to rest some of their prominent starters in that last game that they played in the regular NFL season?
What? You said fair or foul, the decision to, meaning like...
Yeah, like in hindsight, would you have made that decision?
I can see where some people might think that, but I think we have to really go back and the look at the entire season, because that decision was made because you were so beat up. This was not like, I think there's a difference between resting players and, versus, oh my gosh, the fact that what's the storyline for the Browns season? The storyline for the Browns season is that they overcame a horrendous amount of injuries to actually still make the playoffs. Granted, it didn't go well in the wild card round against Houston, but the idea that they somehow were able to scrape together 11 wins with your quarterback down, your running back down, 6 offensive linemen. Everybody was they were going down like flies. So, you can't, but I also understand, I'll say this, the Cincinnati game, you could tell that there was just nothing. They didn't care. But I can't sit here and say it now because I felt it was the right decision then, and I'll continue to say it. They just, you know what? They just didn't show up. And shame on them if that was, if they would have played against the Bengals, they would have, played. They're professionals. You got to be better than that. So I understand the sentiment. I get it. But no, I disagree with it.
Sure. Now on to the defensive side of the ball for the Browns. I got to ask about Jim Schwartz. You talked about it a little bit in terms of like the possibility of him becoming head coach again, potentially next season or in the years after. He has not received any interviews as of yet, interview requests from teams with coaching vacancies. Now, fair or foul, this loss on Saturday from the Browns at the hands of the Texans hinders the likelihood of Jim Schwartz becoming a head coach this offseason.
This is a tough one for me because in my heart, I want to believe that, and just all things aside, my Browns allegiance aside, and the fact that I'd love to see him return next year as their DC because of the job that he did this year, putting all that aside, I find it hard to believe that one game, if one game changes your mind to say that, now, you know what, we were going to interview Jim Schwartz, but now we're not going to talk to him because of the game that they played on Saturday against the Texans, then you probably weren't that much into the guy to begin with. I'm sure it factors in a little bit, but I wonder if that's always something more like media created because, Dan Quinn's getting the same thing with the Cowboys because both of those guys were considered candidates. Not that doesn't mean, that, they're sure jobs, but they were going to be hot candidates. Both of those guys, unfortunately, picked a bad day to have a bad day on the defensive side of the ball. But I've never understood the idea that, like I said, we want that guy. We're interested in that guy. Oh man, but after that one game, no, we don't want him anymore. It seems like that your interest in him was very thin to begin with.
Chico, it reminds me of Kevin Stefanski's last game coaching with the Minnesota Vikings. I don't know if you recall, he was in the playoffs, right, with Kirk Cousins at the helm. And they totally crapped the bed. Like, they got blown out of the water. The offense looked awful. And I just remember, like, coming out of that game with this gross taste in my mouth. Like, ugh, that's the guy that we want to make head coach? That's the lead? That's the front runner for the next Browns head coach? Come on. Haslam, you can't be serious. So I'll admit, I kind of fell for it a little bit because obviously now, like in hindsight, I love having Stefanski as the head coach. I think the Browns need to extend him and Barry, but I digress on that standpoint.
Thank you, Bo.
You're welcome, Chico. Now, one last thing from that Browns game. David Bell quietly had himself a solid performance, 8 receptions on 8 targets. Now only 54 yards, but he looked reliable and he made some big plays when the team needed it. Fair or foul, you having more optimism for David Bell having a more prominent role next season based off of that performance?
Not really. He's first of all, he's a possession receiver, so it's not anybody that thinks David Bell's going to be like a game changer. No, I mean, he's not going to be that. What's interesting, and I think it's going to be fascinating here in the weeks and months to come as far as the Browns, is what does that wide receiver room look like? Like, are you giving Amari Cooper an extension? For me, absolutely I would. I don't know what the money is. I don't know. But I love that guy, and he kind of, to me, is a lot like Nick Chubb. Not as, not to the level that Nick Chubb is as far as his impact, but it's pretty close. But in terms of like his importance to the team, the culture, everything that you want your team to be, Amari Cooper embodies that. But they need, here's the big question for me. Like, how do we rank Elijah Moore's season? I don't know how to view. You say, well, I don't know how this guy did or that guy did. I really don't know how Elijah Moore should be graded this season. Do you give him an incomplete because you had so many injuries that nobody could get on the same page for the most part? Flacco comes in, then all of a sudden there was that connection. But again, let's go back to training camp. That was the theme coming out of training camp, aside from Jim Schwartz and the defense. On the offensive side of the ball was, oh my God, just wait until you see what they're going to do with Elijah Moore. And just wait and see what they're going to do with it. Well, just wait and see. So was it injuries? Was it all because of injuries and that, he really is the dominant, not dominant, but the threat, number 2 threat that you need? I don't know. I mean, I legitimately, genuinely don't know what the answer to that question is. Do you have to go out and find somebody? I don't know how to grade him. I don't know how to judge him this season because of those injuries. Was it just one of those that was out of his control because of all the injuries?
That's a great point with Elijah Moore, and I do wonder how the Browns decide to move forward with him in regards to their plans at wide receiver too, because I can distinctly recall like specific instances where quarterbacks were just missing him, whether it be DTR or Deshaun Watson early in the year. Like, he was getting open, he's separated, and then guys just missed him. So how much do they put on him versus how much do they put on outside factors that he can't really control? That is something that I will certainly be interested in. Now, I found another thing that really fascinated me, Chico.
Yes.
Quite the interesting wrinkle in the NFL rulebook. Fair or foul? You knew that rip moves from pass rushers actually nullified holding penalties. That is a specific rule in the NFL rulebook. I had no idea.
Rip
I
moves
feel like that
nullifies a holding penalty.
Yes. As written in the NFL rulebook.
So, okay, but is where you're going with this that's why, because, Micah Parsons, remember when Micah Parsons got, they called a holding during the Dallas Green Bay game?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody cheered. It was kind of like a mock cheer because Micah Parsons never gets a holding call against him. Same with Myles Garrett. Are you saying that's why? Are you hinting that that's why Myles Garrett doesn't get the holding calls that maybe one would expect he gets?
I don't think it's the only reason, but I think it's a reason.
Wow.
I mean,
give me your rip move, Boom. What is a rip move? So it's like a swim move.
I don't want to knock over all these computer screens here.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of swimmy.
What? I don't understand why that would. Where did you get that from?
This was courtesy of Nate Tice, who was he does stuff for The Athletic and Yahoo Sports.
Yeah, he's good. I know who he
yeah, real football guy. Obviously, I mean, if you dive that deep into the NFL rulebook, because I seriously had no idea about this. I just felt like mind-blowing stuff that I wanted to bring to your attention, I suppose.
Okay, thank you, Bo. Consider mind blown.
Yes. Anyways, commencing fourth, Chico. J.J. McCarthy, UM quarterback, has declared for the NFL draft. Felt like, obviously, okay, the Wolverines went on to win the national championship. There's no disputing that they're a good team, great program. They did some things right this year. J.J. McCarthy, in my opinion, was not one of those things that was right at the end of this year. It felt like they had to fall back on that run game pretty heavily. He seemed pretty ineffective, and now he made some throws. Obviously, against Ohio State, he was very effective. He made all the big throws. But in those playoffs, Big Ten championship, Natty, he really didn't have to make any of those big-time throws.
Well, okay, that's just it. But before you go any further, you say he didn't really have to make those big. You said they leaned on the run game because he couldn't. Was it because he couldn't, or because they just want? That's how Michigan wanted to play.
I don't think that's how they wanted to play.
Well, how did they? I mean, of course, that's how they wanted to play to some degree, because Harbaugh is all about physicality and running the football. I guess what I'm saying is, because I'm with you. First of all, let me just say, what was your question on the final question on McCarthy? Fair or foul what?
Fair or foul, J.J. McCarthy is a second-round pick. He'll go in the first 2 rounds.
I'm going to go fair on that. You killed me, dude. I wouldn't be. I would, if it were my team, I wouldn't want them to take him. Like, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, he doesn't jump off the screen and go, "Oh my God, this guy's going to be a great pro." I also don't think whether it was because he was hobbled, whether it was because, they just wanted to be more physical. And I don't think he can make all the plays. The one thing I will say about J.J. McCarthy, though, that when they needed a big play, more often than not, he delivered, whether it was through the air or whether it was with his legs. So I don't think it's fair to say, like, well, they didn't want to go to him because they didn't trust him. They trusted him. I think their offense, their identity was running the football with Donovan Edwards and, of course, especially Blake Corum, who also, I believe, is. And he's another one. Like, people are going to think this is like Michigan bias. It's not. There are some players on that team that that Sandstrel I think is an absolute stud. Blake Corum, to me, isn't going to do much in the NFL. I mean, his numbers look incredible, especially the touchdowns. He wasn't as explosive coming back from the knee injury. I mean, he's not like a breakaway threat. Is he great out of the backfield catching the ball? Like, is he a Darren Sproles type? Nah, not really. Like, I don't know. I mean, he's going to get drafted. I think he's going to make a team. But, like, you can't convince me that Blake Corum is going to be a guy that is in an NFL backfield and is the lead guy.
He reminds me of his running back coach, Chico. Mike Hart, guy who was a phenomenal college running back. Carved out a very brief career in the NFL. I remember he got drafted by the Colts. I think
Hart was more explosive than Corum, though.
Yeah, but that's why. I mean, I agree with you. Okay, whatever. Point stands. Okay, moving on.
No,
Chico.
I'm just saying. I think I'm making a point that I think Hart. The reason why Hart had a little bit more of an NFL career is that he was more explosive. You all right, Paul? You on anything? Good.
I'm not all right, but I'm hanging in.
Okay.
So, I want to go back to the NFL because Dak Prescott had some interesting comments in the locker room after the game. We've been talking a little bit about Mike McCarthy and whether the Cowboys should move on from him. And so Dak said, quote, "If Mike McCarthy's on the hot seat, I should be too." Fair or foul, Chico, the Cowboys should consider moving on from Dak Prescott at quarterback.
Okay, you always say this, and I understand why he's on thin ice, because I understand why pretty much everybody is after what happened yesterday and what has happened, recent years, and the fact we already detailed it. They haven't been to an NFC Championship game since '95, and they can't get out of the divisional round, although now they won't even get to the divisional round. My question for that is always, though, okay, who are you replacing him with? I don't know who that is. I mean, if there's a guy out there, and the money that's tied up with him, I don't know if that's even feasible. But yeah, I mean, I keep hearing he's on thin ice. I mean, what's funny about this is going into that game yesterday, it's kind of like saying, like with Jim Schwartz and Dan Quinn, going into yesterday's game, we thought that, Sunday's game, there were people that still said Dak Prescott was an MVP candidate. So after one game where he supposedly put together an MVP caliber season, he now all of a sudden is written off. Like, I mean, he didn't play well. Nobody played well. But, like, I just think it's funny how drastic these things get. Like, McCarthy being on the hot seat, I understand. And Dak, I would understand if he didn't have a great year. But he supposedly had an MVP-type year, but they lose in the wild card round, so now he's expendable. I don't know. I think that's the beauty of the Dallas Cowboys, to be honest with you.
The beauty of the Dallas Cowboys. I hope you have EK on this week. I just want to hear his thoughts on the Cowboys. I want to hear him gloat a little bit. But anyways, elsewhere around the NFL, Vegas Raiders find themselves in a little bit of a predicament. Now, Max Crosby, their stud defensive end, has come out and said, if you don't hire Antonio Pierce and promote him from interim head coach to head coach, I demand a trade. They haven't interviewed anyone else yet, Chico. Now, fair or foul, if you're Mark Davis, you've got to make Antonio Pierce the next head coach of your Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay, why are you saying that, though? Because you don't want to lose Max Crosby, or because he's the right guy?
I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, Crosby is a franchise player, like a guy that you want to see finish his career on that team.
I would be willing to call his bluff on that if he's like, I mean, yeah, I don't doubt that he and other guys are going to be upset. At the end of the day, they can call for a trade all they want. That doesn't mean they're getting traded. However, more to the point is Antonio Pierce I think he is deserving of the job, but it's like everything else. We talked about it, wait a minute, all of a sudden, Mike Vrabel's available. So how many teams, and this is always so interesting to me, how many teams that stayed with their coach or were planning on staying with their coach, then all of a sudden a guy became available, a Mike Vrabel, a Jim Harbaugh, if he is indeed going to leave Michigan. We don't know. He's interviewing with the Chargers. But you can say this is the guy that we want to back until, we didn't know that guy was available. And that's what I don't know. On his own accord, on his own merits, I think Antonio Pierce should be the head coach of the Raiders. I think it's more than just he has the locker room and he fired him up and all that. It's more than that. I think he deserves it. But the reality is, you never know what's going on behind the scenes. You never know that maybe they want Jim Harbaugh bad. And if Jim Harbaugh doesn't end with the Chargers and the Raiders make him an offer and Harbaugh's like, you know what? Yeah, I can go here. Then Antonio's not going to be the coach. But I will say, aside from all of that, I think he is deserving of the job.
Yeah, so I'm going to be producing the show with Greg Williams later in the day, and yes. I'm sure I am eager to ask him about that because Antonio Pierce he played in Greg Williams' defense. And I know that he's Greg Williams thinks very highly of him. I feel like he's going to say, hell yeah, you got to make him the head coach. And it seems like he really was able to turn that franchise around. So I am eager to see. Oh,
on his own. Like I said, on his own merits.
Yeah.
He deserves it. But what I'm saying is the reality is, like we talked about when Vrabel became available, when Pete Carroll became available, Belichick, all of a sudden, like there's certain surprises, or somebody becomes available that you didn't think was going to be available. That now we got to think about this a little bit. I mean, you should either be sold or not sold on Antonio Pierce, and I think they are and should be sold on Pierce. But things happen. We know that.
I agree with you. The thing that the one X factor here is the fact that it seems like Mark Davis is a little bit unhinged, and it's like anything could happen.
You think?
Yeah.
You think? Yeah.
All right, last one I got for you on today's Fair or Foul. Some comments from Myles Garrett following that loss to the Texans, where he was asked about Jim Schwartz, and Garrett said, quote, he said from the beginning he's going to ride with what got us here, and he's not going to change up. There's not going to be any magic calls that's going to get us out of anything or get us through anything. I've seen some fans kind of upset by this because it might suggest that Schwartz didn't make any adjustments throughout the year. And we've had people come on the show and say,
look. Throughout the year or the game?
Well, throughout the year. And we've had people come on the show and say, what opposing offenses know what they're going to get from Jim Schwartz. He doesn't hide anything, but it's still incredibly effective. Now, Do you think that these sentiments from Myles Garrett were fair or foul in terms of, I guess, how he portrayed Jim Schwartz's approach to running the defense?
I don't read it back one more time. I didn't hear anything. I mean, I know there's ways in being cryptic and all that stuff, but I didn't. I think we're just looking for something to. It didn't sound inflammatory to me, but read it again.
Yeah, I don't find it inflammatory. I think it's just, I guess, a philosophical standpoint.
He might be upset that, well, maybe we should have changed some things up. Here's the thing, though. Myles, and I love Myles. We all love Myles. Myles didn't do anything. Everybody has to look in the mirror. I mean, the guy had 1 sack in the last 7 games. Now, he did much more than just get sacks. I get that. But in that game Saturday, he was nowhere to be found. And I refuse to believe that's all on Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, and to that point, so it was interesting working the game on Saturday. I heard Gerard Cherry talking to the guys during a commercial break. He's their field reporter on the Browns radio network. And he's like, I'm seeing no energy from this defensive line. They don't look fiery today. And, I mean, I think that we saw that play out on the field. They didn't have that same fire. They didn't have that same dominance that they were asserting all season long. And that's not something that I put entirely on Schwartz. I don't know where I would toss that blame, to be honest, Chico.
You can't put that on Schwartz. I mean, like I think it's more, and as I said, okay, let me be clear. When you lose the way they lost, and when your defense gets embarrassed, everybody, including the defensive coordinator, of course, Jim Schwartz would say it too, everybody's looking in the mirror. But to me, this is more about guys, just the execution was terrible. I mean, Greg Newsome getting beat numerous times, and not just by a little, by a lot. MJ Emerson, and I like these guys. I really, they're the core that we talk about for the Browns moving forward. But like MJ Emerson, I still need an answer as to what that was. Like, I don't know if he thought somebody else had made the tackle or was going to make the tackle, but he just basically stepped right in front of Brevin Jordan and was like, excuse me, let me get out of your way so you can get the rest of the way down the field. When you're talking about, if you're not motivated going on the road in the postseason and you need Jim Schwartz to get up your ass a little bit, then I don't know what to tell you. And I don't think that's what he was saying, though.
I don't think so either. I don't think that's what he meant at all by it. But you mentioned Greg Newsome, and I lied. I have one more question, Chico.
Thank you.
Because you talked about the comments where Greg came out the day after the loss as Browns players were cleaning out their lockers. And Greg said, I thought I played pretty good. Could have been better. Now, some Browns fans were up in arms over this sentiment. Obviously, it was a rough day at the office for one Greg Newsome. But fair or foul, do you take offense to these statements?
I don't take offense to it, Bone, but I don't.
Does it bother you?
I don't think anybody in that situation, particularly a guy that was one of the ones that stood out as not playing well, should be talking about how he didn't think it was that bad. Like, I don't need him to be on public square and people throwing snowballs at him, but I also don't need, I'm not offended by it, but when I hear him say that, like, no, you didn't. I mean, and anybody and everybody knows you didn't. You did not play a good game, period.
Offended was a poor word choice. That's a little too extreme, but it did bother me to hear him say that, Chico. Anyways, that is fair or foul.
Okay. Update, by the way. Ohio State is beating Michigan in hoops, 59-55. Take that, Ann Arbor. All right.
Is Jim Tressel speaking at halftime?
I don't know. That's a good question. Boy, those were the days. And 300. By the way, I mentioned that Bulls thing. We're going to get into this a little bit more tomorrow. Remember I was talking about the honorary the ceremony, bringing back like Pippen and Jordan, and they had all said that they were going. Pippen, this happened over the weekend. Pippen never showed up. Jordan never showed up. And then when they tried to honor Jerry Krause, they booed his widow. Are you like
that
if
poor
you're
woman.
The Bulls, why are you even doing it? Like, unless the reason it became a story was, oh my gosh, Jordan and Pippen are going to be there. That's the reason I was talking about it. So then they didn't even show up. So, I mean, why even hold it? But then the idea that even if Jerry Krause was alive, and I wouldn't, even if you don't like him, I still wouldn't, in that type of situation where you're trying to honor people, you don't boo him. But you booed his widow. Like they talk about Philadelphia booing Santa Claus. You booed his widow, who was clearly upset about it. Ron Harper had to console her. Chicago fans, that is weak. I mean, that is really, really weak. And you're booing the guy had a hand in a lot of success. You might not like the way, it ended up, but he had a hand in a lot of that success. Are you booing because you're upset your team hasn't been relevant really since? That your team this year sucks? I don't know. But you don't boo the widow of the guy that was the architect for it. That was about as low and classless as I've seen. And again, shame on the Bulls for even going through with it if they knew these guys weren't going to all show. But then shame on the fans for doing what they did. That was inexcusable in my mind. And by the way, the Bulls are in here in Cleveland tonight, not in Burke Lakefront Airport, but they're going to take them on at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So
yeah, I can't get over like seeing her reaction and seeing her face as all those boos were raining down, and just like how upset she was. It's just sad to me, Chico. It does irk me.
Okay. Thank you, Ball. All right. That's going to do it for this Monday edition of the Chico Borman Show. Coming up tomorrow, it's our final edition of the Bold Bald Breakdown. Don't cry, kids. Y'all come back now here. Myself and Nick Shook, NFL.com, NFL Network, will be breaking it down, not just Saturday, but the entire year, and a look ahead, a peek at what could be in store for the Browns. They've got a lot to look forward to. They also have some interesting decisions to make, and we'll tackle all of those with Nick Shook coming up on tomorrow's show beginning at noon. Thanks to Christopher Price from the Boston Globe for joining us, Michael Bohm for all his interesting insight, and I'm Mike Chico Borman. Be back with you tomorrow at noon. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. See ya.